Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, hosted by Echo and brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine. Buckle up as we take you behind the scenes of some cutting-edge advancements in emergency medicine and critical care transport. In this episode, hosts Mike Fadale and Blake Shrider sit down with Kevin Rixmann, clinical supervisor at the University of Minnesota Medical Center, to discuss a game-changing innovation in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest treatment with their mobile ECMO program. Together, they explore the evolution of eCPR and ECMO, the critical role of rapid response, and the collaborative efforts needed to identify candidates and educate community emergency services. Kevin shares key insights into the challenges of implementing this life-saving technology, from streamlining response times and improving training for EMS providers to the utilization of ECMO 99 and air medical services. We all know that caring for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest patients presents many challenges for us in the HEMS community. But be prepared to be impressed as Kevin discusses the crucial role air ambulances play in the survival of these patients. If you're passionate about emergency medicine, cutting-edge technology, and the relentless pursuit of better patient outcomes, you won't want to miss this conversation. Stay tuned as we dive into the future of pre-hospital cardiac care and the impact of ECMO on survival rates. Also, as an added bonus, make sure you check out this podcast on our YouTube channel for extra pictures and videos of the U of M's mobile ECMO program and the process behind pre-hospital cannulation. So let's get it started. Thank you to our sponsors, Metro Aviation and Airbus.
Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine, produced in partnership with Echo, Every Coast Helicopter Operations. The Valor Flight Crew podcast promotes the personnel and life-saving equipment behind helicopter air ambulance services. Join hosts Mike Fadale and Blake Shrider for in-depth interviews and expert insights from air medical personnel, pilots, communication specialists, and maintenance crews who play critical roles in airborne emergency response.
Line 1 accepting.
Copy, Line 1, gotcha, accepting. You're going to be talking to Red Feather 1 on LCEMS.
Welcome back to the Valor Flight Crew podcast. I'm Mike Fadale, and I'm here with Blake Shrider, and we are your hosts for the VFC podcast. How you doing today, Blake?
Off to a great start, Mike. How are you?
Pretty good. After our technical difficulties this morning, I think we're finally on track, so hopefully we'll have a good show for you.
Oh, it's going to be great, man.
I'm ready for it. Bring it on. So we have a little bit of a different show for everybody today, and thank you guys again for tuning in for all of this. But most of our podcasts so far have been really kind of safety focused or kind of industry-wide trends and topics that we've been talking about. And this is kind of the first one that we have that's going to be a little bit of a different route, talking about some of the medical side of things and processes, specifically with some programs out there and some really important concepts and advancements within the industry, specifically around ECMO. And so this time we get to speak with Kevin Rixmann, who's a clinical supervisor at the University of Minnesota. And he was really involved with the design and implementation for a brand new cutting edge mobile ECMO program there. And the program was really developed with a desire to improve some outcomes for out of hospital cardiac arrest patients. And it's really taken a lot of collaboration between the hospital and the EMS systems that are around there, as well as the fire services. And I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation to have with Kevin and really kind of dig into some of the details of how they were able to put all of this program together and bring this much needed service to all of the people in the community of Minnesota.
This is going to be really great to talk about today, Kevin. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Mike, before we forget, before we go any further, we gotta break the ice a little bit.
Yes, we do.
We gotta interrupt this flow this morning. So, Kevin, what we try to do is we just want to break this ice a little bit. What we ask everybody, what was you pull up your phone on your audio streaming? What was the last song you were listening to?
No cheating.
I literally just shut my phone off. It was probably, I like quite a bit of EDM. And
okay.
So I'm honestly very a wide open scape on that. So sometimes it's a classical cello, sometimes it's some EDM, sometimes it's hard rock, sometimes country.
All depends on the mood of the day, right?
Yeah, I like to say I'm pretty bipolar in the front of music. So
and it depends on what traffic's like too.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm up north at the cabin, so the traffic was not horrendous at all this morning. So
perfect.
It's probably some kind of EDM.
Well, I'll openly admit I follow that philosophy. So on my drive home from work yesterday, I put on a classical playlist. So no lie, the Adagio in G. That's the last song I was listening to kind of relax on the drive home.
This is very different for you, Blake. I'm starting to get concerned. I was back in a country mood again, traveling in the car. For some reason in the car, or I should say in the truck, country just kind of hits me all in the feels. So I like to have that playing in the background, and it was Caught Up in the Country by Rodney Atkins. So
nice.
That was my last one.
We're still waiting for one day to get someone that had Taylor Swift on their playlist. And who knows, maybe she gets a shout out. Maybe we'll get a shout out. I don't know.
Maybe. So I just pulled up my Spotify on my computer, and it was A Joy, which is like a remix kind of song. So
nice.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's speaking of EDM, when we were down in San Diego for the Echo conference, there was an Odessa concert that was going on right around the corner. So got to go see them before the Echo conference started, which was a good start to the week.
Nice, man. I didn't know that.
So Kevin, we discussed that you're the clinical supervisor at University of Minnesota. Are you able to give us a little bit more of a background about yourself and your experience in medicine?
So way back in high school, I ended up realizing that I wanted to be a flight. At then, I wanted to be a paramedic. And so went off to EMT school during high school. And then after that, worked as an EMT on the truck throughout my 4-year degree. That's when I shifted to wanting to be a nurse. And so ended up going to nursing school, post-nursing school, starting as a new grad at Mayo Clinic in their CVICU. So took care of pediatric and adult patient transfer. So we did transplants, anything heart and lung, and then anything over 2 kilos on the heart assist device. So ECMO, Impella, balloon pump. Obviously, that's not for the kid. Berlin heart, things like that came to our unit. So got really well versed in cardiac assist device, open heart surgery, resuscitation, but knew I wanted to fly. So then I pulled a 0.6 FT at Hennepin in their emergency department. So that's our level 1 trauma, adult and pediatric center in Minneapolis. So did that for a while and then started flying. Once flying for a couple of years, we ended up having a new program come to light in Minneapolis, which was looking for a program to operate it, which thankfully LifeLink 3 became the operator for that. And I was one of the first 8 selected to be on the team. After on the team for about 1.5 to 2 years, they were looking for a base lead. And so after that, they selected me as the base lead, and I've been in that role with LifeLink as the lead. And then the university hired me as a clinical supervisor about 1 year ago.
Nice. That's certainly a long road to get to where you're at, but I'm sure well worth it in the end. Sounds like you guys are doing some really impressive things up there. I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with you about it. Kevin, we appreciate you really joining us today and talking about this amazing program and kind of bringing mobile ECMO to the community in Minnesota. So I wondering if you can kind of talk a little bit about how this service kind of came to be realized in your community and what was the whole spark that made this happen.
Yeah, so this started back in 2015. Dr. Dimitri Yiannopoulos, he felt like there was nothing more we could do for cardiac arrest other than trying this crazy thing, which he ended up starting. So the cardiac arrest starting and originating in VFVT, he partnered with St. Paul Fire, which is just a city over, short drive, 15 minutes roughly on average to get to the university. And so he was bringing these patients in cardiac arrest who had presenting rhythms of VF or VT to the cath lab. And so you have 2 options then. You can try to stint while ongoing CPR, which we all know probably how complex that is. Trying to get a good image with fluoro, with Lucas head sitting in the way. So instead of fighting with that, he elected, let's just put them on ECMO and then go back and retrofix the lesion. And so that was kind of the big stem. That was called like the University of Minnesota protocol, which was EMS arrived on scene. They identified a VFET rhythm. They contacted him on his personal cell phone. He would respond off hours or all hours to the university.
That's some dedication right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then put these patients on pump. And so as they were doing this, they saw really, really good outcomes already. which then he had a fellow working with him, Dr. Jason Bartas, who is actually now on our team as a physician. And so between the two of them, they were doing every single cannulation for VFET patients at Capeman. So now fast forward a couple of years, they thought, geez, we kind of need to do a study on this. So they did, it was a randomized trial, but they developed it so that, or they designed the study so that they could do early termination if it was beneficial. And so in 2019, they realized we've kind of like plateaued on our service that we can provide at the university. So how do we make this go mobile? Which is really when we start, when I and the others started getting involved. So they partnered with LifeLink 3. So LifeLink 3 is a consortium-owned helicopter service in Minneapolis, of which Fairview University is one of the consortium members. So it just kind of made sense. But also they needed a centralized dispatch center so that we weren't fielding phone calls directly to the physician. They were kind of calling one center and then calling who was on call. So in 2019, we went live. I think we went live at, it was 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. I can't remember, but we had our first call activation like 5 minutes prior to actually going live.
Wow.
So, I mean, you could tell it was a need in the community. Responded to Regions Hospital, that one actually was, and successfully placed the patient on pump. So to date now, this year, we just hit our 500th eCPR ECMO patient since 2015. So last year, 2024, we were the busiest eCPR center in the world.
That's crazy. It's just, I mean, it's awesome that you guys have that service in the community and you don't realize how something like that is so needed. And I feel like a lot of times, you talk through ECMO and everybody kind of like cringes when you say that 4-letter word, right? Like it's not something that everybody is usually gun ho about. And to see some people that are so passionate about it and believe in it so much and understand, it's not just about cannulating, right? It's about identifying those appropriate patients that are the target audience for this procedure and being able to get them to the right place at the right time and the right circumstances to make all of these things happen. And so I think that's pretty awesome how passionate you guys are about it and how you've really evolved this whole system and made this into something that really is a huge benefit for the entire community. And I'm looking forward to talking a lot about more of that throughout the podcast here.
And we see that when we do outreach, it's a really unique phenomenon. And I think it's any time in medicine when you have a new advancing product that comes available, but it's only available to certain areas. And so for ECMO, it's time restricted. Like that is our number one enemy in this. That's like one of the driving forces of a go, no-go decision is time, like time of arrest, time of low flow state, time of no CPR, time to the ECMO center, time to get the patient on. All that time dictates the outcome of the patient. And so what we found is like the people in the metro, like they're used to the service that we provide. It's kind of plateaued in its excitement and things like that because we've been doing it since 2015, if you say, but it really ramped up in 2019. So, going on 5, almost 6 years that we've been doing this. So we've since started to expand outward. And we find the new accelerants in EMS providers as we get farther out and come out and teach them like, hey, like we might actually be able to service your community. And we see that fresh light because they haven't had this opportunity yet. But we also see that when we go to conferences, and we go and talk about this at states or areas that don't necessarily have the team that we have. We always forget like how lucky we are to be in the metropolitan Twin City area where we have such a good cardiac resuscitation team.
It sounds like you've got not only that drive, but you've got the support and to have the physicians and the people that truly believe. And when you said you were talking about how you guys go out and you talk to the fire departments and the EMS services that go out there, just stressing the importance of everything that we can do early onset. And you said time is the biggest enemy, and we see that constantly every day. And now would it be fair to say, have you seen like with the training that's brought to crews, the earlier the recognition, are we making a dent? Are you guys making a dent, slowly expanding that time frame out to get these patients back to normal quality of life out of hospital?
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing we talk about is metrics. So we are constantly measuring our team's metrics, and I guess measuring metrics is kind of like a broad spectrum, but we're always analyzing where we can improve to help improve the outcomes. And what I mean by that is like we go to the point of like understanding. So how long did it take us to respond in the vehicle? When we responded, how long did it take from the patient ambulance bay to the patient arriving to the trauma bay? How long did it take us from sliding the patient over to actually doing the first needle puncture? And from first needle puncture, how long does it take us to get on? And in our truck, we have the beauty of it all being audio and visually recorded. So as painful as it is, we go back and watch it.
Go back and watch yourself. Yeah.
And it's really funny because there's a lot of cuss words that often go.
I have
an association.
No doubt that there is. And completely warranted.
Yeah. But, we're able to see like, okay, we stood around for like 2 minutes while we could have been optimizing this procedure instead. So we can really go back and fine tweak our team. But then what happens is all this information goes into a CARES database, which is a national database. And it allows us to measure outcomes for cardiac arrest, not necessarily VFET, but asystolic, PEA patients, things like that. So what we were able to do is everything that gets put into the system, we can go back and look at and try and understand reasoning and rationale for things, or like, do we need to try and change something? So for example, we had a good amount of patients who were coming in a hypoxic state and in a state that wasn't making them eligible for ECMO. And so when we went back and looked at the drawing board, we're like, okay, well, a lot of services had switched to supraglottic airway because we do know that supraglottic airway is an easier airway while going down the road. But we also found that people were using the Lucas. We use the Lucas up here. It's a mechanical support device. That they were using it at a continuous compression rate at 100 a minute. And so we know that with the mechanical device, that's a piston-driven device. And we have a supraglottic airway, which isn't occluding any type of airway. And so as you were ventilating, as the piston was deploying, physics will always win and the air goes out. Right. And so all these patients were coming in hypoxic. But we were able to get a blood gas off of every single patient that comes in, we're able to bring this back to the medical directors of the ambulance teams and be like, hey, like, these are what we're seeing with patients who are coming in with supraglottic airways, continuous compressions. And then we were able to actually publish a paper, Dr. Bartis did, in comparison endotracheal tube to supraglottic airway and their candidacy for ECMO. So long story short, I think we are making headway, but also, that was kind of a roundabout way of getting to the time of, or the metric of time. But we partnered again with St. Paul Fire in trying to optimize their scene time and treating it like a trauma resuscitation. And so they get on scene, they identify it's a VFET patient, they shock it, travel to the ambulance, and then start transporting. And we can see that they've averaged about a scene time of roughly 10 to 11 minutes for these cardiac arrest patients.
Wow.
And so, they're moving and grooving, but the outcomes have been phenomenal.
Are they using a Lucas device?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Yeah, so we require that in our guideline for not only for safety of the EMS provider while screaming down the interstate, in rush hour traffic, but secondarily because we are a fluoroscopy-based team. And so to have one person doing mechanical or manual compressions just doesn't really work with the C-arm coming in. But then tertiary, like we know that people fatigue and fall off. And so Lucas provides, or a mechanical support device provides a consistent compression every single time.
Right. And that's so amazing that you guys are like constantly reinforcing that. Like our agency is moving to using a Lucas. We've got one obviously on our aircraft. So I think what you pointed out, all this data you guys are studying are showing that like once you get ROSC, or if you're still going on, as soon as we start moving the patients, right, they don't like that, and they usually trend off. So to train with that, you treat it like a trauma resuscitation. You give it your best 10 minutes at the scene, get the basics done, get good compressions. You move them to the truck. You've got the Lucas on, right? So now maybe that buys you that time. You get in there, get your ET tube if you haven't already, just based on what you guys are showing, the supraglottic versus, an endotracheal tube, and getting them to you guys and having all that data. That's so amazing to hear how that's really making a difference for patients.
It's a kind of interesting, kind of backing up a little bit. You talked about the CPR out in the field with using the Lucas and the supraglottic airways. And ironically enough, it really ties into it for education for my program. We use the foam frat platform for all of that, and just listen to the eCPR eligibility discussion between, with Tyler, Sam, and Alec. And it was really interesting kind of hearing all of that. And I mean, it makes sense at the end of the day when you talk about, just the physics behind it and what you guys are seeing and correlating those, statistically. And I think it'll be interesting to see when the next updates come out as to what recommendations are, especially with ECMO becoming such a big bad part of the industry that I think is starting to take over. Everybody's like hearing about it more and more and trying to get these resources out there. It's amazing. Yeah, for sure. I wanted to kind of back up though a little bit and talk about, so, we're talking about patients that are in arrest and that we need to get them to an ECMO center. But a lot of this starts even way before all of that. Like this is back when the call happens. And so how do you identify those particular patients, and what kind of patient criteria are you guys utilizing to either activate your mobile ECMO program or activate resources to be able to get them to an ECMO center?
Unique strategy. We try and target as many people as possible that can become calling partners. And what I mean by that is, we don't care if you're a medic, we don't care if you're an EMT, if you're a firefighter, first responder, police officer, anyone who has a device or around a device can call. And right. So like we're fortunate. We have the Helmsley Foundation that supported our team on the initial startup, and they've continually supported us as we grow and try new items. But one of the things was an AED rollout. And so we basically were able to purchase AEDs for every single squad car in the state of Minnesota.
Wow.
And place these in there. But then also what we did is we took their old ones, refurbished it, and pushed it out to the community. So whether it's a fire department, like a community center, things like that. The beauty to this is we can go through it and via the code stack report, if they're connected to the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, we can actually actively see when they turn on an AED and when they provide a shock. And then we can actually look at their code history. And so all that does is
in real time?
What's that?
Is that in real time?
If it's connected, yes, it is real time.
Wow.
Yep. If it is not, then as soon as they upload it, we can go back in and look at it at a later date.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, on any given day, we can see when an AED gets powered up as long as it's near their squad car, because every squad almost has a hotspot in it. Right, so we can see as soon as, like Brooklyn Fire, Brooklyn PD is Brooklyn Park. I mean, when they fire up their AED, we can say, oh, they might be going for an arrest.
And does that give you an alert? Like, so you'll see, does it say, hey, this squad car 692 has activated their AED. Do you get like an alert system?
And the code, yes, on the system it does if you're logged into it. Yep. So we haven't like rolled out like full implementation of this, but what our idea is that we can start monitoring this. And if we don't receive a call within a short period, we can start calling out to them. Be like, hey, you might have an ECMO candidate right at your hands right now.
Keep doing what you're doing. We'll be there as soon as we can.
Yeah, exactly. But it goes back to the theory of like, all we require now is one failed shock. And so age 18 to 75, and we always teach these as soft parameters. If you have a 78-year-old who's working out at the gym, we want that patient. Right. If you have a 16-year-old who's in the adult living body, we want that patient.
Yeah, for sure.
So we always tell EMS providers 18 to 75, that's a rough age limit. If it seems like a good call, definitely give us a call. And so basically what we want is, we know that time's a factor. So we don't want someone who was an unwitnessed arrest, potentially been down for 30, 40 minutes.
Right.
We want that witnessed arrest, immediate bystander CPR, one failed shock. And then we ask that this patient be to the ECMO center within 60 minutes of the initial cardiac arrest.
Okay.
And why that is really important is because our literature has shown that at 60 minutes, the mortality is just, it skyrockets, and it's a reverse plateau. And so at the 60-minute mark, the steep curve is just a nosedive right into 0% survival.
Even if you have amazing CPR happening.
Yeah. I mean, we do have survivors, right? We've done CPR for 90 minutes and cannulated the patient neurologically intact. But we do know that we have to treat a lot of those patients in order to have one survivor. So after 30 minutes of CPR, every minute that passes is 2.5% mortality. So when we say minutes really matter, we truly
for sure. They really
minutes
do.
matter.
Yeah. It's amazing to be able to expedite that process. And, talking about some of the education, I'm assuming that this requires a lot of outreach, with communication centers, with local fire and EMS agencies and police departments, and making sure that everybody's aware of, what services can be provided and how do you, that seems like such a huge task to kind of roll that out. Like, how do you implement that education, and how do you continue to do that education with all of those agencies? Because there's so many people to get that important message to.
Yeah. That's where the bags under my eyes came from.
All the stress in your life, right?
Yeah. My hair has substantially gotten grayer. Dimitri has lost a lot of his hair. So we have a really dedicated team, honestly. And like, without our team, we couldn't do what we do.
Yeah, I mean, you have to.
From the dedication of the physicians, we have 4 primary cannulated physicians who cover call 365 between the 4 of them.
Wow.
That's including above and beyond their cath lab call, their critical care call, things like that. So our office team, amazing, always working, but more so like our clinicians. We have 13 clinicians. We've elected that all of our clinicians are flight clinicians because we find, no offense to any other style medicine, but we find that the flight clinicians had a higher acuity experience and exposure and a better understanding of the resuscitation. And so it was just an easy partnership to have a flight clinician step into the role. So basically what it looks like is I go out and do the initial training, and then I have an amazing team who will follow up or go out and continue to do it. And so we go out and do the initial contact, try and pave the way for getting buy-in. And then we have other people. I think there's 3 or 4 people on like our outreach team, and they go out and do the continuing education. And we just monitor it. I mean, you can clearly see, because the CARES database will show us how many cardiac arrests there were, how many VFETs, and then we can correlate it to how many activations we had. And you can watch them.
And just see that number keep rising.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's an accelerant to go out and keep doing the education, but also to see with our team, we find it really, really important that as soon as you activate us, we interact with you. Right. And by that, I mean, like, we jump on a common talk group. So we use a tactical talk group and have a conversation about where we're going. And then we try and give you treatment plans and things like that. More importantly, when you interact with us in the emergency department, if the patient's on the fence, you will always see us place wires, draw blood gas, and analyze that patient right then and there. We're not taking the complete story and saying like, oh, I don't know, it doesn't sound right. Like, we're not going to do it. No, we're going to take the patient back to the cath lab. We're going to go to one of our cannulation suites, place wires, get a blood gas, and then we'll determine if the gas is good, we're going on. And we encourage all of our EMS partners to stay there and watch, because our average needle to on pump time is about 4 minutes.
That's insane.
So
it's absolutely insane.
From the time the patient rolls in.
So you may have practiced this once or twice, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. But from the time the patient rolls into either the cath lab, one of our trauma bays, or our ECMO cannulation suite, to the time the patient's on pump, we average about 7 to 8 minutes, with a couple of minutes to slide the patient over, prep the groin, run the ABG, things like that. So it's a very fast paced environment.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that's got to be quite a rush at that point in time. But obviously, to make all this happen, like this had to include a lot of backing from the hospital, from the EMS agencies, from the flight services. Like, how do you get everybody on board to do this? And because it's not just time, it's not just the clinicians, it's a lot of finances that go into making this possible as well. I mean, you have the ECMO 99 program, and then you're also doing, these other cannulations, and it's
a robust system, and like, how do you get everybody on the same page to be like, yes, this is so needed for the community?
Yeah, it's been a battle, honestly. Medicine is a unique area of expertise, in that like uncharted territory is sometimes the best territory to be in, because we don't know like what the advances could be because we haven't been there yet. And so as this was developing and growing, there was a little bit of skepticism of like, is this really the right thing? It's a heavy burden on finances. It's a heavy burden on staffing, because these patients are often, 2 to 1 when they land in the ICU. So 2 nurses to 1 patient. And then it will trickle down to a 1 to 1, but also you need a specialist to sit pump. So right. At any given time, the resources for an ECMO patient is really, really heavy. And so obviously we have a large cumbersome part of that as to getting buy-in from our own ICU, our cath lab, our ED, and then our hospital system. But as we grow out into the community, we have multiple different ambulance services which are not covered by the same medical director. And so I think there's like 30 different ambulance services, maybe more in the state of Minnesota, but at least, 20, I think, in the Minneapolis metropolitan area. And not every one of those is covered by the same medical director. And not every medical director might feel that eCPR is beneficial to a patient. And so to come through and, we're constantly, every year, sometimes, twice a year, we're having medical director meetings where we have them over for dinner and we show them, what kind of statistics we have, what things are looking like, what new research plans we want to do to keep the community involved and engaged with where we're heading for resuscitation. And I think that's the key part, is just being fully transparent. And, it's been a wavy battle up and down, but I think for the most part, we show them the numbers, and numbers don't lie. You know, we can take the national average of, 9 to 11% for cardiac arrest we can show them eCPR data to show, anywhere from 30 to 40%.
Wow.
And we get kickback all the time saying like, that's still not great numbers. And you're right. Like we would love to see the 60, 70, 80%. But if you're looking at metrics, 30% is failing. And, any other metric that we'd measure, if you had a 30% success, you'd be like in the office 24/7. But you also have to correlate it to what the national average is. And if you say 10%, we're 3 times the national average for that.
Right. Right.
So it's all a mind game a little bit, per se, of trying to convert them over to understand, like, yes, we're not going to save everyone, but if we can be on combined forces, we can save a lot of people.
Right. It's the optimist pessimist discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Or like what you're bringing up, like when we talk about numbers, like what you guys are doing in Minnesota, we're trying to do down here in our area. And guess what? They're trying to do that in all the areas across the country. And I think that for the longest time, we've sat with like, 10%, I guess it is what it is, but no, it's not, for instance, like we locally in our area, we have put AEDs that are dispatched when the 911 call goes out for a cardiac arrest, and it will alert your phone to where this AED is. You go pick it up, and then that AED, you follow the nav on the screen to where the arrest is, right? So that's not just here in South Florida, it's all over across the country. So I think we've said that, hey, 10% is not good. We can do better. And we always bring up the old C word, COVID, right? But like that really taught us a lot of things that, the body is pretty resilient and medicine is constantly changing. And you've made 3 times the amount to get into the 30-40%. To have the backing and have everything to push that no, we can go further. I absolutely see that we can get to the 50-60%. I mean, that's a pretty good odd if you think of a witnessed arrest, and it really takes a lot of intense resuscitation. To me, 50% sounds a heck of a lot better than 10% for a chance of survival to come back. I think anybody would take those odds.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I find it really interesting hearing some of those outcomes. 30% to me, I know it doesn't sound like much when you talk about metrics, but it really is something huge when you're talking about, going into cardiac arrest patients and survival rates. And it really is well above, what that national average is. And it's just impressive to see, but just with, laying the appropriate groundwork, identifying the appropriate patients, doing the right education out in the community, and having the resources available, whether that be a mobile cannulation or getting them to a cannulation center in the right amount of time, those small pieces of the puzzle that a lot of them don't take a huge amount of finances to get behind, those little things have made so much of a difference in the outcome of these patients. And I think it's such an awesome process what you guys have done, and really, like, you don't think about all of the steps. And obviously this is something like, this was a crawl, walk, run. This is not something that happened overnight, right? Like, this was a long time in the making to get to where you are right now. But I think it's just so impressive to watch how those steps have evolved and to see where, you're at. And I was kind of wondering, are you able to talk a little bit about that transition and, like, what does that look like? What you kind of briefly talked about what things were way back when. You talked a little bit about where things are now, and how has that transition guided as to where you guys hope to go in the future with this?
Just like anything, we're always looking for the next best thing. So we have a couple projects up our sleeve that we're actively pursuing, and they're completely in different avenues, which is the fun part about it. But it all revolves around how can we get to the patient and get the patient on pump faster.
Yeah.
And so, back in, like I said, 2015, it was pretty much a single service that was partnered and coming only to the university's hospital, only coming to the cath lab. So then, a couple of years later, it was, okay, let's try out a couple of different trucks. And then it was pretty much anyone in Minneapolis who had Dr. Yiannopoulos' phone number was calling, and so all hours of the care at night. Yeah, exactly. But the nice part is it showed that there was a number needed, that we needed to do something. But more importantly, what we do is we track, like, geographically. So our system will show us, it'll pinpoint right where the cardiac arrest happened if it gets uploaded into the CARES database appropriately. And so we can see, like, where the concentration of cardiac arrests are, and so it really goes to show that we can mold our team to meet the need of the community. So we saw that there was a need in the East Metro, and there was a need more in the South Metro. There's a need right now in the North Metro. And so we can start targeting that and say, well, geez, like, we're missing all these cardiac arrest patients. And so as the years evolved, we really started to believe in the hub and spoke model. So you always have to have a main hub, right? So that's our university. But then we have to be able to outreach somewhere. And, I talk a lot of time, and that is kind of like revolving around it. But when we speak EMS providers on scene, and then we wait for them to transport, upward of 20, 30 minutes to the U, that's valuable time. And we know they probably have already been on scene this was prior to us really lecturing how to get off scene in a fast period of time. So they were probably on scene for maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so we're pushing that threshold of now we're introducing that time where every minute is 2.5% mortality. And so even a 10-minute ambulance ride is drastic to patient outcome. And so we identified 2 hospitals in the metro where we could eliminate, half of that drive time. So we have a hospital in Southdale or Edina, so Fairview Southdale right there. And then we have a hospital in the East Metro Regents Hospital that we brought on board. And we're able to then take that 15-minute ring and push it even farther east to that hospital.
Wow.
And so all we're doing is we're just shifting the time burden and getting it farther and farther out. And, as we grow and with new up and coming things, we started doing this with the hospital or with the helicopter as well. So we know that we can move, a little bit faster by air. And so
Just a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. And so we went to an ambulance service where they are right on the edge. A portion of their service area, they can make it to a cannulating site in about the hour mark from arrest. But then there's 3/4 of their area where they can't. And we said, okay, well, what happens if you guys activate us as soon as you get the 911 call for a cardiac arrest? We send our helicopter out, or Lifelinks helicopter out, and they acquire the patient and fly them back to the university, and we cannulate them. Because what we're doing is we're trying to eliminate that dead time between where the ambulance is responding, getting on scene, recognizing the patient. So all of this, the helicopter spooling up, risk assessment, weather checks, things like that. And most of the time before the ambulance is even on scene, we're 5-10 minutes out from the scene. So, that's one way that we've been able to really push outward. And we've had good success when everything falls inappropriate. From the 911 dispatcher recognizing this as being a cardiac arrest, auto-launching the helicopter, or the EMS agency recognizing as soon as they get the dispatch to say, okay, this is a cardiac arrest, we need to auto-launch a helicopter. To even, we've captured a few in Western Wisconsin where we were just out here doing education and it stuck with them and they had a cardiac arrest. They called, we had a local helicopter in the area, brought the patient discharged CPC 1 and 2. So neurologically intact.
So with that kind of hub spoke type model, has that brought up that kind of standardization on utilizing and getting the mobile ECMO, or getting that patient to the center, or getting the patient on pump?
Yeah, it has. And when we have other hospitals or teams that come in and they are looking at doing this is one of the biggest things that we talk about. And it just makes the most sense because we're trying to shave off any time that we can. And that's really the only one that works, other than having like remote, cardiac arrest cars and responding to the scene, which maybe we'll start doing that in the near future. You never know. But that's the only other way that you can really start touching a couple million people,
right,
in appropriate fashion, because the metro is so widespread that in order for us to get from South Metro to North Metro in rush hour traffic, it's over an hour.
Oh.
So it just doesn't work well.
Yeah. Especially when everybody's gridlocked.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing talking about, just the process flows and how you guys have constantly been looking at improving that whole process flow. And I think back to, with my particular program, we used to, a number of years ago, we were the big bad ECMO center in the area. And so this was before a lot of our spoke hospitals were doing cannulations. We would activate, ECMO calls and fly teams to hospitals, do remote cannulation, and then end up flying them back. But the logistics that went into all of that ended up kind of outweighing, what the outcome ended up being, because it wasn't something that you were, ready to go. And now we have a lot more outlying facilities that are able to provide cannulation, but then some of them still can't, manage those cannulations and afterwards. So they'll cannulate and then they end up calling for us to fly out and transfer that patient back to a hub center that is able to take care of it. But when you look at the overall logistics that go into it, I mean, we were affectionately refer to those kind of calls as RECMOs because it's never an easy process, right? Like, and so I think of those patients, even pre-cannulation, like they are super sick, and or, in your case, in cardiac arrest here, and you're constantly looking at ways how you can minimize that scene time and minimize that ability or maximize the ability of getting that patient to an ECMO center in a minimal amount of time. How do you, everything is, I feel like every call we go on is so different. How do you identify those like processes and improvements to be able to minimize that time and not have to spend 20, 30, 40 minutes on a scene trying to get this patient to the right spot and then finally get them going somewhere when, obviously time is a factor in this. And I feel like there's so many factors that go into each of these individual calls. Like what's the process for like cutting out all of the wasted space or time in there?
Yeah. I think that's some mentality a little bit of the EMS provider, the stay and play versus rapid transport, and trying to shift that paradigm. I talk about that all the time, shifting the paradigm. When I used to run ground EMS, we were leaving these patients dead on the scene, VFET patients, it was like you shocked them, you couldn't get them out of it, done. So to transition their mindset from these patients are non-survivable patients to no, like these patients are survivable, and trying to get everyone on that board of like not assuming the patient's dead, but assuming that this patient will survive will help really cut out the excess waste. And at the end of the day, nothing else matters in a VFET patient other than getting them to an ECMO center. Now we do know that like shocking a patient appropriately, we will get a restored rhythm every now and again. Dual sequential, we will get restored rhythm every now and again. But when all those fail, what else do? We go on ECMO, and so if we sit on scene and shock and dual sequential and shock and dual sequential to the 30-minute mark, and now we have a 20-minute commute to the hospital or an eCPR center, now we wasted bot time. But we do know that we can do all of those things en route, right? So like most services have video laryngoscopy. Or we can do, intubations really easy in a moving ambulance. We can do IO, IV placement really easy in a moving ambulance. We can do medication administration really easy in a moving ambulance. And more importantly, we can do bagging of the patient really easy in a moving ambulance. And so we eliminate the factor of people doing chest compressions because we ask them to be in a mechanical CPR device. So that ties up or frees up people so that then they can really go through and do the pit car maneuver, which is go in, shock the patient, identify it, grab the patient, get to the ambulance. And then from there, you have, a couple firefighters that could be in the back doing BLS airway management. You can drop a supraglottic airway initially until you can get caught up and then go back in and transition to endotracheal tube. But of most importance is to get the patient in the ambulance and start transporting, because we do know that we can safely do all the other measures while en route to the hospital. But to shift that mindset is a really, really hard phenomenon to do, because it's been historical that we show up on scene and these patients, we work them on scene and we leave them on scene. Versus now we want them to have the mindset that this is a trauma, a sanguinating patient, and there's nothing in your ambulance that you're going to do to save this patient other than to get them to the OR. And so for the cardiac arrest patient, same mindset. There's nothing you're going to do in the ambulance. Maybe, hopefully defibrillating, dual sequentialing the patient en route to the ECMO center will work. But when that fails, like we need to treat it like it's a sanguinating trauma patient, and the only fix is the ECMO center.
I think that so all these things that you're bringing up, it's hitting and resonating with me, because these are all the things that we're implementing here at our agency and working towards that. Right. And I just want people to understand, it's exactly what you're saying, Kevin, is we're not just showing up on scene, giving some shocks, running the code, and then, sheet in the street, and be like, peace, that's turning that paradigm, right, to saying, no, these patients are survivable. And if there was ever an answer to that question of why are we doing all these things, why are we doing video laryngoscopy, why are we getting Lucases for all our ambulances, why are we doing all these things? For this reason, right? Because like you said, dual sequential, good CPR, getting early recognition, these patients can survive. So, and I think you've really tied in, those numbers show when you can go from 10% to 30 to 40%, that's the reason why. And I think that just, man, Kevin, this is hitting for me, and I think this is really, really amazing to talk about. So as you're describing all these things, how does that training, or how do you correlate the training, not only the buy-in from the hospitals and the EMS providers, but when you talk to your team, can you kind of describe a little bit how you can train your team to take that handoff and run with that. Can you kind of describe kind of how that looks?
Like as we train like the frontline people, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and your team when they arrive either at bedside or a hospital, and how do you correlate? Like, so you've got that buy-in now from the providers, and how can you maintain that level to where they get back to on pump and at the facility?
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. A huge thank you to Kevin Rixmann for sharing his expertise on mobile ECMO and its role in revolutionizing emergency cardiac care. It's clear that innovation, teamwork, and rapid response are key to improving survival rates and pushing the boundaries of pre-hospital medicine. To say it takes a village is an understatement, but the University of Minnesota Medical Center, as well as their local HEMS and EMS agencies, remain committed to providing world-class care when minutes matter for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest patients. We hope this conversation left you with new insights and a deeper appreciation for the incredible work being done in the field. If you found this episode valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts. We look forward to bringing you more amazing discussions promoting the personnel and life-saving equipment behind helicopter air ambulance services. Until next time, fly safe, take care of yourself and your team, and keep pushing the boundaries of cutting-edge patient care. Thanks for tuning in.